Okay, so Kristin, thank you for taking the time to talk to me today and the people at the University of Waterloo. This is really valuable for them. But just to get things going, I thought I should note that your background is in mechanical engineering. You're working in some very important areas. Mechanical engineering knowledge, I think, will be very useful there. But I thought the audience should know, many of whom will be engineers, that you come from an engineering background too. But now you work at RAND. And so the first thing that I wanted you to talk about was what RAND does. Many people watching will know RAND, but many others won't. So if you could provide an introduction to start, that would help.
Yeah, thanks again for the opportunity to tell you a little bit about RAND and some of the work that I do. So RAND is a nonprofit institution, and it helps improve policy and decision-making through research and analysis. It's a nonpartisan organization, and RAND is widely respected for being independent, thinking as far as political and commercial pressures, and their core values center around quality and objectivity. So RAND has multiple divisions where you can do work that is that will be benefiting the Department of Defense. So that can be the Army, the Air Force, also Homeland Security. There's also opportunities to do a little bit like the Navy work if you're into like defense type stuff. But if you are interested in like more of the social side of things, there is social and economic well-being, a whole division dedicated to that. So that could be included in like health, labor, education, any research topic. Policing, for example. I've done a little bit of policing work as well, as far as like, what does police reform look like? Or, you know, how do you have police accountability? And so there's a lot of different topics that RAND has done some research in, and it pretty much is a jumping off point for providing policymakers, corporations and organizations who are interested in trying to further their agendas. But of course, RAND gets to still, you know, say, hey, these are the types of projects that make us comfortable, because you don't want to, you know, jeopardize the RAND name and doing something like, how do we capture more people at the border for ICE or something like that? So I think RAND kind of stays away from some of those controversial type topics. And that way they can stay in the lens of quality and objectivity and not try to step on any toes.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah.
Especially as, I mean, your role, as you've described it, as RAND, is to advise on policy in a whole range of areas that, of course, are very important. Can you talk more about your own role at RAND and the areas that you focus on in your research?
Okay. So when I first got to RAND, I had a lot of things I was interested in. And that's one of the things that I love about RAND. You get to follow the things that you're interested in. And so currently I am very diverse in my research, from doing some things with the Air Force. So they can be like agile combat employment. Something with the Army that I'm doing is about information advantage activities, how can, in a contested environment. So for example, if you have, if you're getting jammed, for example, your cell phone doesn't work, like jamming, how can you continue to get the information that you need once you're, for example, out in the field? Something else that I've been working on, I'm on a space mission assurance project for the Space Force. How do you prevent cyber threats from interrupting your missions? And on the other side of the house, in my what I would call free time, I also do work about cannabis equity. So I've done some research that pretty much talks about what are some of the ways that we can undo some of the harms that have been done to certain communities. What would that look like? And right now I'm leading another project for the state of Oregon, and that one is about loosely drug decriminalization. So they passed Measure 110, which would basically decriminalize certain drugs, and then you would be able to either pay this fine or take an assessment to decide if you should go to like additional have rehab or something like that. And so the work that I do at RAND is very diverse and following some of the passions that I've had coming into RAND, and I don't think that will end anytime soon. So I'll probably jump into some other subjects later, because none of the topics that I'm talking about right now are topics that I knew about even starting at RAND. So that's one of the cool things about working here.
Fascinating areas that you get to work in, and I noted at the top that your background is mechanical engineering. Your skills are in that area. You've got a doctorate in mechanical engineering.
Yeah.
But now you're working on policy questions. So I've got to ask how your career led you to doing this. Most mechanical engineers don't take this route.
No, and that is the most interesting thing about RAND, because I believe it's like a very special place, like a unicorn. But how did I get here? So in graduate school, I went to Carnegie Mellon for graduate school. While I was there, I was interested in like education policy and equity. And I'm like, how can I transition from doing like bench work? I was working on using microalgae for biofuels. So I was part of two labs. One was a cellular mechanics lab, and the other one was a tribology lab, where we did a lot of computational stuff. So how did I want to do education policy, total, 180. So that's how I got into policy, because I figured like, hey, that seems like a smoother transition than starting over. So I applied for the California Council on Science and Technology Policy Fellowship. And there are actually a couple other states that have started similar programs. So they take 10 PhDs each year. I think they increased that to 15 now, where they learn the legislative process, they get trained on that, and then they work in the legislature, either for the legislature doing bills, you're analyzing them, providing recommendations, or I think they have an executive branch fellow component now, where you would be placed in the governor's office. That can mean you can work for like GoBiz, like the small businesses. How do you, kind of manufacture that? Some even get placed in budgeting and finance, so they are learning like ins and outs of who gets taxed and stuff like that. So I was placed with the Black Caucus because of the things that I wanted to work on regarding like equity. I really enjoyed my time there. I got to know a lot of people, again, how the sausage is made. And I thought that was really cool. The member that was the chair at the time for the caucus termed out for being the chair. And that gave me an opportunity to explore some other things. And so I was told by a friend that I should apply to RAND. And I was like, okay. And so I applied to RAND, and I was like, hey, they actually do all the things. And at RAND, again, like you aren't told by a member, for example, that you have to do certain things. At RAND, you kind of get to, like I said earlier, follow some of your passions. You don't have to stick to a certain subject area. And I really like that flexibility. So that's pretty much how I ended up at RAND.
Fascinating, and really different from an academic researcher, where you are very much confined to the field that you work in. To have the freedom to move into other fields is very attractive. So at RAND, you do this work for policymakers and practitioners on a regular basis. And you are aware that the recommendations you make can influence big change in people's lives. How do you deal with the ethical questions that arise in your work? How do you approach your own response to those?
Right. So Rand has this reputation of like excellence and influence through its focus on integrity and quality standards. And so all of the Rand work, from publications, databases, briefings, all of that goes through rigorous quality assurance process. And so everything that you do, sometimes you'll have like a ride along Q&A person. They'll help you kind of put those checks and balances in order as you go along and say, hey, have you thought about this? And I think that really helps kind of keep the researchers thinking outside of the box. Oftentimes we bring on experts who may not be a part of the project team, who have additional insights. They'll be able to help us think about things we haven't thought about as well. They can also include like subject matter expert interviews as part of our research protocols, where we'll be able to talk to folks who are on the ground doing the type of work that we are researching. And so from all of that, I feel like all of the Rand work is very high quality. On top of that, it's not a guarantee that very specific ethics questions will come up, but in some of the work that I've done so far that it's pretty relevant is, and some of the face recognition work that I've been doing regarding public perception and the ethics that come along with that. So for example, there are many benefits, for example, that DHS, they were the ones sponsoring the project, are interested in, like how can we, find some, serial killer or something like that, I don't know. How can they go about trying to find like these drug lord criminal enterprises, or that can even be for like looking at people's license plates numbers, for example. And what are some of the implications when you're thinking about using that type of technology? People don't feel comfortable because they may feel tracked or incorrectly targeted. And we've seen that happen a few times already with people using face recognition software and then getting it wrong because of how they're being trained. So I feel like, some of those things you kind of think about and make sure you put those as like caveats in the research, like, hey, here are some of the ethical concerns. And by voicing those in the report and making sure that they stand out is very important, and Rand does that as well.
And it sounds like there are many things that are done to try to ensure the ethical aspects of the research that you're doing are considered carefully and appropriately addressed in the work that you're doing, which of course is good. So you're also a member of the artificial intelligence group at RAND, and you're thinking about the implications of artificial intelligence for society. So I thought I'd ask what you see as the important ethical questions in AI today, and how you think we should be addressing them.
I think that's a hard one because as the technology continues to grow, I think that policy is having a hard time keeping up, especially when it comes to free speech and people being able to have creative control over certain things. Like the biggest thing that folks have been talking about right now is like either doing the AI art, for example. Who are the original creators of this art that were used to train the AI to create? Like, what kind of credit do they get? Do they, is there any payment or contribute? Did they ask to have their work, used in such a capacity? So I feel like the biggest thing is policy keeping up with AI technology without stifling its growth. And some of the other things that have come up also that a lot of folks are concerned about is deepfakes and how that kind of turns into false and misleading information. For example, you can have like the president of the United States, a recording, of course, not real, but it appears very real, of them saying something like very doomsday-ish, and then people running with it and continue to, spread misinformation. And so I think, how do you go about tracking who the original artist is for that? I believe that China recently put in some policies that would try to help curtail some people, from using deep fakes in that way, like having some kind of watermark on their work. But at the same time, like, how are they going to track that back still if they did not follow the rules? And I think that that's going to be like the hardest part. So, ethical questions and how they're going to address them, I'm not sure. But I think it's going to really have to start with the folks on the ground doing the work in AI to think about this as they create these new technologies, and that they think about the types of safeguards that would kind of prevent the misuse of those technologies.
Yeah, that's when we talk about that at Waterloo with students, we emphasize that this slow pace of regulation and guidelines around artificial intelligence and other technologies, and how engineers themselves need to be more conscious of the implications of what they're doing and making decisions themselves about that are hopefully going to be good ones as far as people are concerned.
Yeah, and I think that it's very important that they not just think about those who are around them, but also consider those who they might not otherwise come in contact with, because oftentimes the folks who are not involved in that type of research are the ones that are most harmed. And you don't want to continue to exacerbate certain issues that you see in society as it becomes like to making sure things are not biased, stereotyping, and that type of thing.
You've said that you work in defense areas, defense and terrorism, and you've provided guidance on this to the US Department of Defense. What do you see as the impact of artificial intelligence there now, and what do you think might happen with it in the future? Of course, I don't want you to talk about things that you shouldn't, but at the same time, are there things there that you can talk about?
Okay, I would say like one project that I've worked on in that area has to do with how do you keep, I'll call it information advantage activities. How do you kind of maintain awareness of what's going on in the particular areas? And this definitely also comes up as an ethical question as well, which is, you have all of these public or private entities or corporations who are collecting all of this information about you, and that data is for sale. So with that being said, is the government not a paying customer that they could also, gain access to that? And how do you feel about the government purchasing information about you? Because people, a lot of times don't trust the government. And so I think that that's one of the things that, the DOD is actually looking at as well. Like, even with the Ukraine crisis right now, a lot of the information that has come up has been from like these, open source data, open source intelligence that you can just go on Google and look at, Google Maps and kind of see like, oh, this is kind of what this area looks like, and that type of intelligence. So that project is really interesting because you do have those ethical concerns there, but it also talks about like, how can the US stay ahead of the game? And with that comes those ethical questions like, how much is too far? But all of this information is already in the ethos. So what types of corporations can we have to build like this data fabric, for example, that the commercial folks already have, together. We can plug and play all of these different data sources and say, hey, this is what the map looks like, to help us have this situational awareness before we send, for example, soldiers into this area. You can use that type of technology to kind of figure out, using AI, like how many planes have come through this area, or how many bombers have come through this area, how many 18-wheelers carrying whatever, using different types of filters, have come into this area, because you can pay for those types of services from commercial entities. So I think that, that is a huge one as far as like what kinds of technologies pertain to AI that the DoD is, interested in and looking for. This is just based on the work that I've done. I'm pretty sure that there are others as well, but that's what I know the most about. And, obviously, there's a lot of ethical concerns with that, and how to make sure that those companies that are selling your data, once you sign up for their free, I don't know, device or program or app on your phone, that you kind of like sell away as well. So how do we not get the commercial folks in trouble, for working with us? I think Google also had a little snafu with that when they were talking about working with the government, and they had to back down because of the employees not feeling comfortable with that. So it's a lot that kind of goes into data privacy, who's responsible for the data, who's going to be using it, and how. So yeah, that's what I would say. And I'm not sure what's going to happen in the future with that, but probably along the lines of what's already happening, which is all of your data is for purchase. So anything that you put online is for gain.
And you're very conscious that that there are ethical questions about defense use of that data that is being commercially gathered now, and you've talked a lot about that. I wanted to shift from defense into racial equity, and the use of artificial intelligence there, or the implications of artificial intelligence there. And I want and really to understand what you saw as the positive and negative aspects of artificial intelligence as far as racial equity was concerned.
I think that's a very difficult question, because again, it really depends on how the AI is trained. When I first got to RAND, I will just say, like, I was exploring. So I wanted to do something where it's kind of like a ride along, or a police assistant that basically would kind of help the police officer kind of engage the situation to where they won't feel intimidated, or they would know like, hey, this person has some kind of weapon on them or something like that. And so, and of course, this is just exploratory, nothing that actually came about, just exploring. And so it basically incorporated multiple pieces of technology, including like face recognition, using on the officer a kind of like something like a Fitbit that kind of measures like heart rate, to kind of see like, one of the things that comes up a lot is, oh, well, I was scared for my life, but what does that look like? How do you measure that? So it was like a sensor that kind of measured the state of the officer. With the facial recognition, there was like also like speech recognition as well, where you'll be able to kind of like gauge the person's tone. And I think that's where we kind of get a little bit into the murky waters, because across different cultures, things are going to be perceived differently. And so it's kind of hard to say, like, when you hear this type of inflection, this definitely means danger. And I feel like that is going to be the hardest thing when it comes to like racial and ethnic incorporation into AI. And you really have to know those communities. So how do you plan to do that? Do you conduct surveys? Do you observe people? Is this based on research? And I don't feel like that's really been explored that much, even when it comes to like going to the bathroom, for example, and waving your hand, waiting for the water to come on. Like all of these types of things are not really considered. Even, for example, the temperature scans, for your forehead, that little device, thermometer, not as accurate for more melanated people. And when you think about that, who are the folks that are developing these things? And I guess, like, going back to your question, how do you, hold on, what was the question again? Because I will keep going on tangents.
On artificial intelligence and racial equity, and what you think we should be doing there to ensure we do good things.
Yeah, I think I kind of answered that, but I would definitely say you would have to get into those communities and see if that technology works with them and incorporate them into your research. That doesn't mean you just go over there and say, hey, you want to be part of this research thing? Like, no, people do not trust researchers. So you have to build a connection with them, build a reputation and a relationship with the communities that you want to work with, that you want to engage with. And I feel like that's especially lacking when you come to, the very engineering type of folks. Rarely do you see more of like the social skills kind of playing out in that. So I would definitely recommend that more social skill type classes be incorporated. So then that way they know how to engage. What does a focus group look like? How do you conduct one? To really get feedback from the communities that you're wanting to. Like, there's plenty of community-based research approaches that can be incorporated in AI research and development.
Yeah, I mean, I think what your answer to this question really shows is the complexity of being able to ensure non-bias in artificial intelligence with different cultures, and that in different races and other factors that may cause bias in the research, or may suffer from bias in the AI activity. So I think it's very helpful for people to hear that. I just got two other questions. The first is, what advice would you give an organization on their work with artificial intelligence today? How do you think they can better ensure that they behave appropriately from ethically with their artificial intelligence?
I think similar to what we're asking the researchers to do, engage in the communities that have often been overlooked, marginalized communities, to understand how the technology would affect them. Would they even want to see that kind of technology being used? Do they feel like they would be hindered in any kind of way? For the facial recognition project that I talked about, we conducted a nationwide survey asking, what kinds of things would you be comfortable using face recognition for? What would make you uncomfortable? Who would, what kinds of privacy concerns do you have? And I think that a lot of times some organizations may just be focused on the bottom line and not put the resources towards that kind of exploration. And so I would definitely recommend that those types of organizations that are using AI, especially, having the potential to affect a large amount of people, especially marginalized groups, that they put money aside to explore those types of things and not just focus on, okay, how many people can we sell this to? Very bottom line oriented. So I think that would be my biggest piece of advice for them. And how can they better ensure appropriate ethical behavior? I think that would be relatively easy if they have like these safeguards in place on the types of use of their products. Are there certain guardrails, or potentially could they revoke the rights and privileges of folks who misuse their product? It really depends on if they have, what kind of product it is. Is it just software? Is it just a physical item that folks can continuously update? And so that would be a pretty cool thing as well, like these software updates. Once you find out, hey, this particular thing does not recognize certain languages or dialects in the way that it should, and mislabels people. I don't know. And being able to have those kinds of capabilities in place where they can continuously update and fix the things that they know are wrong. And I feel like a lot of times maybe we don't get full disclosure about that, and then at that point you're harming people and they not know that they are being misrepresented in some way. So being fully transparent about it.
I mean, it seems like a very good suggestion, because that we'd be able to update technology as we discover things that are undesirable about what it does. So because, of course, we may not be able to anticipate all of those things when it's first produced. And so being able to fix it later would be very good. Okay, my last question is really about advice you might have for people who want to work in artificial intelligence. So I'm thinking of the students that might be watching this who are thinking they're going to be working in artificial intelligence in the future. Have you got anything that you would want to leave them with that you think it's important they know?
I would say, how would you feel if the technology that you're creating harmed you in some way? And put yourself on the other end of the stick, the shoe on the other foot, and say, what am I not thinking about? Who does this product, who could it impact the most in the worst way? And kind of design your product, software, whatever, to that. Because oftentimes they say the rising tide raises all the boats. So that includes everyone from the very lowest to the ones at the top. So if you think about who the product has the potential to impact the greatest in the negative way, then the possibility of you thinking about, more of the ethics behind what you're doing has a greater chance of being more widespread and not just focused on communities that you're familiar with. And so I would recommend getting out there and exploring those different options. Sometimes people don't really think outside of the box, and that has the potential to hurt a lot of people. So that would be one of my biggest recommendations, because ultimately, like, you are the ones that are kind of shaping what the next generation of AI is going to look like. Are you going to be inclusive, or are you going to be more like the same? And where has that led us so far? So you want to be an entrepreneur and explore different things and not just settle for mediocre and, hey, this is what's been accepted before, this should be good enough now. How can you improve on what we've already been doing? And think about that.
Thank you for your time today, Kristin. That was great advice. you've given great advice throughout the interview, and I think people will benefit from it. So thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the opportunity.